56, a weekly podcast where we discuss all things game audio, from creative ideas to the latest techniques, project experiences to audio secrets. Here's where you'll find in-depth coverage and opinions related to game
audio. What happened there?
It was weird. It's like a ghost.
Oh man, you're really getting in the Halloween spirit then.
Did you hear that clearly, or was it a mess?
No, that was great, but where is that coming from? What's going on?
From my hat.
Oh my god.
My hair. Look at this hair. Oh my god. Don't look at the hair. Look at the hat. Look, it's got speakers in it.
Okay, that is silly. That is really silly.
That's way cool. Like it's got the Atari logo. It says Atari. It's a special Blade Runner edition.
Oh man.
Hold on, I got more. Hold on.
Uh-oh. Oh jeez.
Oh. How meta. I'm playing the Blade Runner 2049 soundtrack through my Blade Runner hat.
So you've got the lush, beautiful, nuanced sounds of the. I mean, I know that for the new Blade Runner, they do a lot of similar things to the original Blade Runner, right? Like they do use a Yamaha CS80, I believe.
Yeah, throughout a lot of it. I watched a documentary on it, short one. It was really good.
Oh yeah, that was it the one? I wonder if it's the one that I watched. That was recently linked through the sound effect guys. Was it that one?
Oh man, well I watched one, Mangini doing sound effects for Blade Runner. Is that the one you're thinking of? Or,
yes.
That was pretty amazing. Mangenius, as some people call him.
Yeah.
But this one was Facebook Live. They had Hans Zimmer and what was the composer's name? What's
his name?
Left me just now. Just left. Anyway, had them talking. It was pretty amazing.
It's cool.
Yeah, so apparently they did. The main composer got the job, and then, I think it rotated through some composers, and the guy who got the job in the end kind of had a short window to get everything done.
Oh, right. Yeah, it used to be the dude who always who worked with him for Sicario and Arrival, Johan Johansson. And then it became Hans Zimmer and Benjamin Wallfish.
That's it, Wallfish.
Yeah.
So he did a lot of great themes, and then Hans Zimmer went on tour, so he just kind of holed up there and worked on the soundtrack. And when Hans Zimmer came back, most of it was done, but Hans, I guess, added the Hans sound, and they turned to the CS80 for a lot of work. Like when it had questions about cues, like, what do you think this should sound like? I imagine they were pushed. I can't speak for them, obviously, but from what I saw from the documentary, it looked like they were really pushed for time, and they had to make some choices. And hell, you're never going to go wrong with a CS80.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds, the bit that I have heard sounds great. I still have not seen the movie, so please don't spoil it for me.
I won't tell you anything.
It's actually really frustrating. I just had a friend of mine invite me, hey, I'm going to watch Blade Runner again tonight. Are you in? And I'm like, no, I can't. I'm sorry. I'm crazy doing work. And although I guess right now I'm actually on here instead of working, but that's okay.
Well, we appreciate it.
Ooh. Oh, man. Yeah, well, it's fun. I need a break from work, honestly. And I can do a little bit of this, but unfortunately, a big 3-hour excursion, or I mean, it's more than that.
Yeah.
For a movie these days.
I think the movie's like $240.
Yeah. And then there's all the other time that's needed in order to, get to the movie theater. And yeah.
They need to bring the movie to you, sir.
That would be great. Maybe one of these days I'll get one of those Sony Digital Cinema 8Ks installed in my new house. Probably never.
I'm looking at the chat. Adriano says that there is a CS80 on eBay for $7,500 right now.
Oh my God. Seriously.
I got to tell you, I'm I'm starting to. How can I get $7,500? You know, and a Mellotron's always been my first big, ridiculous money on a synth, and so I can't get the CS80 until I get a Mellotron. Just seems the right thing to do.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I got the I've got two Optigons now, which is kind of like a Mellotron, but it runs on discs rather than tapes. It runs on these little record-shaped, super floppy, flimsy films.
Well, one of these days you should just have that thing running there. Instead of that opulent chair that you've got behind you, just replace it with the Optigon and have, if people are there, they're actually sitting at one of those nice little piano benches right behind it. Okay, let's play some stuff. That'd be fun.
But it needs to be like a cable access show. I need to be like sitting at the Optigon, have somebody sitting at the chair doing the spiel at the beginning of the show. I'm playing some kind of Vincent Price movie theme.
That would be great. I was actually thinking about what is it? The Truman Show. Where they have that thing where the director, played by Ed Harris, is doing that thing. Okay, bring it up. We need this musical emotion here, directing that guy at the keyboard while Jim Carrey's character is meeting his dad for the first time in years.
Wow, I haven't seen that movie since it came out.
It's
good memory.
So touching and funny. It's I love those sort of dramatic comedies. It's hard to do right. I think it's one of them that just worked really well.
Well, I've said it for years. I the kind of composer I think I would want to be most is the guy who writes the text about what's happening in the music when you've got the mute on and you're reading about the movie. What's that called? CC? What is it?
Wait a minute. Isn't it just those? Usually these days, I see it as just those 3 little yellow music notes. It's like they don't even tell you what type of music. I remember before it would be things like, light jazz music or heavy rock. But now it's just, musical note. Don't worry about what the actual background music is at this particular time.
See, that's the composer I want to be. I want to write like epic orchestral music and just, there you go. There, that's all. I didn't do anything. I just wrote the words, but you get it. You fill in the blanks.
Oh, man.
But yeah, I'm seeing just the musical notes too, but I am also seeing Chase, who is like struggling with the internet. Did you wrestle it down? Who won?
I did.
Chase won.
For now.
What happened?
My laptop is doing something funky that I can't explain it. It's really besides the point. So I hopped on a different computer, and this is okay for now, I guess.
Sounds good, except your mic is a little low. If you can find a way to bring that up for me, please. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Just hit us with a test once in a while. We were just talking about Chase. Oh, wait, Chase wasn't here. I have to do it again. Hey, Chase, here's how we open the show.
Hello, and welcome to Game Audio Hour number 156, a weekly podcast where we discuss all things game audio, from creative ideas to the latest techniques, project experiences to audio secrets. Here's where you'll find in-depth coverage and opinions related to game audio.
Nice.
What?
When you can't remember.
I got my crazy speaker hat.
That's amazing.
Oh, I still can't hear you, Chase. I'm so sorry.
Well,
we will move on to topics.
Oh, gosh. Topics? We have to do topics?
Yeah, one of my favorites was, do you guys care if we do board games to video games, like design, relationships? How does that relate to game audio? Because I know I think of it from a design standpoint, not necessarily a game audio standpoint. Although Sirenscape, which is a fantastic product and has fantastic sound effects from a lot of people you see on this show, you should get it. And music as well. Get Sirenscape, sirenscape.com. This brought to you by Sirenscape at sirenscape.com.
Oh, man.
I'm trying to learn how to promote.
Pouring in.
Anyway, I mean, one of the topics was on our list was about Chase. Could you say it better than me? What is the topic?
tabletop games to video games.
And we're talking
Tabletop
about just like aesthetics. What? See, everybody doesn't know. Chase keeps this impeccable list of things that we talk about in our everyday conversations at the Game Audio Hour Slack channel. And we get in these long conversations about stuff, and then Chase will write it down as a topic because he's like, that's a great idea. We should talk about that. And then we promptly forget what we were talking about. A true statement right there. So somehow we ended up in some conversation about board games to video games, but I don't remember how it related to game audio.
So it's like related in terms of like ideas, lingo, aesthetics that have transformed from board games to video games. So Dungeons and Dragons would be a good example to Skyrim. How that was influenced, and even if you can go back further than that, right? Ultima, Wizardry 5. Am I on the right path here?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I remember now. I'm reading also. Well, yeah, I mean, I remember working with a couple of people who had no idea that hit points was a Dungeons and Dragons invention. They were video gamers.
Huh.
Well, that's rather interesting. Armor class, also another one of those kind of things. Like the history of video games, if you start tracking it backwards, you end up on a table. And some of this stuff has been around for quite some time, and it's still being used today.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting how so many RPGs were transformed from board games to actual video games, and the inspiration that stems from it. I mean, Kyle and Vince, you guys can speak, and I'm sure if Mike was on the show, could speak many times over of this game was inspired by this game, and this game was inspired by this game, and so on and so forth. I only know a little bit based off of my homework.
Ooh, homework. Yeah. It's so funny. Video games is homework.
My personal homework.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I've got a sort of a weird take on this. Yeah, RPG sound is kind of interesting, especially with big RPGs, things like Elder Scrolls, where you've got all these persistent sounds that are happening in the world because, the world is a persistent thing, and you've got to have this sound of the world that is consistent and coherent and continuous as you go from place to place, and you're going from place to place without loading, so it's consistent and continuous and all that. And I can see how that's sort of on the face of it, very much like what you have in terms of the mechanics of classic Dungeons and Dragons, where you're basically making a game out of insurance actuarial tables, because that's what it is. All right, we're keeping all this data, and somehow it's fun. But when I think about what really happens in Dungeons and Dragons, and really any other role-playing game, you have all those tables of stuff, which are great. That's really just a tool. And what Dungeons and Dragons really is, at the heart of it, is not about managing those numbers. And other people will disagree with me on this, but for me, Dungeons and Dragons, at the heart of it, is storytelling. It is interactive storytelling. It's storytelling with a group. Other guys are contributing to it. The dungeon master is contributing to it. All the players are contributing to it. And you've got storytelling. And there's timing. And there's, an event is happening right now. And it's actually kind of funny because that's very much at odds with all the sound that needs to be made in order to make these really coherent, consistent, and continuous audio worlds. We're state-driven. We've got all these things that are persistent and based on this really big, chunky, finite state machine that is the world. But in terms of the meaningful stuff is the story, which is, timing and moments and emotions and, something was said at that point. And sometimes I feel like, that's something that was said, like the various bits of dialogue that might come from an NPC. that's sometimes something that doesn't really matter in the game context. It's there because I guess the character has to have a voice, sure, but that's actually subjugated in favor of feedback that is about the player and the player's building up of stats, or the world and the world state. Okay, state is important, but really noting moments and emotions and key events. A dungeon master, a really good dungeon master, is, I don't think, necessarily one that is really fantastic at keeping all that data in his head, or even keeping all that data organized on paper. A good dungeon master keeps things moving with the right event, the right point, or the right action that will bring people to do interesting stuff together with him.
Absolutely.
And I think, to me, there's actually a little bit of an irony or a disconnect that happens there with, we have to make all of this audio for handling all these states, but we also really need to make audio for these individual events that are meaningful.
You've hit on a couple things as you were talking. I've kept going over things in my head. I was like, oh. So, the whole reason I'm a gamer is, well, there are two very core reasons. My brothers and sisters, who are almost all older than me, would gather around the table and play like Monopoly or whatever. And having that kind of social experience, that bonding with other people, was something that was driven into me pretty young. And number two is my brother Matt brought home the white box D&D stuff from college. He's 10 years older than me, and gave it to me. And then I started playing with my friends. And my whole future was carved out by that. And then music happened, and I tried to figure out a way of wedging those things together. It's amazing how simple our lives are as humans when you think about the catalysts that set you on a path. But that was one thing related to what you were saying about like how, oh man, I can't remember. It was related to something you'd said earlier. Sorry. But the other thing I wanted to say is that the mechanics that are the charts of stats that are supporting a Dungeons and Dragons game are codified into a video game. What I think video games could benefit from still in this area is that in Dungeons and Dragons, the dungeon master plays that major role of looking at those charts. It's kind of like in Dungeons and Dragons, you've got a game designer live. In a computer game, the game designers are all gone. The game's done. It's set. And so you don't have the ability for a designer to go, well, let me reference the mechanical stuff here and affect the story in an interesting way. And I don't know how many video games I've played where I've reached a cut scene, they're promoting the story forward, and I think to myself, I don't really dig the story, or it took a twist that I'm not crazy about, And with a tabletop game, you can kind of sense what's going on there. And a great DM, like a great game designer, really has a sense of what the people want to see. Now, a video game is appealing to an enormous audience, where a tabletop game is 4 or 5 people. That's a lot easier target to hit. But there's something important about being able to, in real time, use the mechanics to manipulate the game in a way that's desirable for the player. And from a video game standpoint, that's, if I look at that in reverse, I think desirable for a player, I go, okay, it's interactive, so I've got to kind of have an engine that watches what the people do and can make really quick changes. And then you go a step backwards and you get the designer involved. It's like, I'd like to have somebody live affecting those changes. And I've always been a fan of the Neverwinter Nights series. And you could go in as like a DM kind of role and start dropping monsters in front, and affecting the players. I always thought that was a really cool multiplayer option they had there. And I'm surprised it never took off. That just seems like a reasonable and smart thing for a game design or a game company to do, is to build a game that has a multiplayer aspect where somebody can come in as a DM role, has all the information in the manual about stats and stuff, and can start in real time affecting the interactions with the players.
It's man, I'm actually thinking right now about weird Japanese stuff. Because I am wont to do that. You mentioned Neverwinter Nights. There's a really fun game well, okay, I'll say fun in quotes, but it's an interesting game for a GameCube called Homeland, a role-playing game where you could have up to 36 players playing, and there is a dungeon master on their GameCube basically laying out what is this rather actiony Japanese, clearly a Japanese role-playing game, what that game was going to be laid out in front of all the other players. And these are 36 players, by the way, on a LAN, on a local area network.
Oh, okay.
But it's kind of hilarious to think about it because, wait a minute, can you imagine 36 GameCubes actually hooked up to a LAN? Amazing that, you know, that this idea of having a digital game master trying to foster a group and their gameplay with this game tool. And I like that.
You know, I was thinking two things. 36 GameCubes is probably the number that Chase has.
I'm actually about 32 less than that.
But really?
Oh, okay.
Yes.
There's 4 GameCubes?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I will not tell you the stories unless you want to hear them of how I've attained each one.
You always
let's
want to
see.
hear the story.
You have 4 Game Boy players so that you could play Zelda.
I do have 4 Game Boys.
Okay.
Wait, I think I have more than that because I have one of each kind and I have two of the 1989s, one of the SP, one of the Advance, and then I have one of the colors, which I need another color for the one that I originally owned. And then I was trying to get a micro for my friend, but yeah, that's it. The
Okay, I got
where one was given to me, another one was given to me, one I found at a thrift store, and I can't remember how I got the 4th one.
I mean, if you have 2 that were given to you, then why get the one you found at a thrift store?
Because I was refurbishing it and then I wanted to sell it, which I ended up doing. So maybe I have 3 now.
You're saying you're flipping GameCubes?
Yeah, and other systems like Sega Genesis. I buy them for cheap and then I restore them and sell them for people.
That's really pretty rad, though, man. I am envious of your collection. And by the way, I'm
envious of your collection. What are you talking about?
No, I need a good Sega Genesis. That's I think my Sega Genesis works, but my Sega CD is shite. That thing's terrible.
Oh, the Sega CDs are just very difficult to maintain. They're kind of lost on that.
I remember somebody told me that the reason the CD didn't work is because the case itself was not very strong, and if it got twisted at all, then the whole thing was shot. And so Sega had this extension I bought that you could attach it to your Sega and then mount the CD on there, but it could still flex. So I then super glued that to a piece of wood.
Oh man.
And it still didn't work. So I have this like anvil-sized Sega CD player in my attic that's weighing down the rafters.
Oh jeez.
That's the noise of Halloween, huh?
But I still want one. And you know, I still miss I have a ColecoVision, but I don't have enough games. I've just got Zaxxon and River Raid. I need to get a bunch of Coleco games.
I want to play Dragonfire next time I'm over. That's the game I grew up with.
Oh, I got to get it then. For me, the ColecoVision game for me was Zaxxon. But anyway, so D&D has informed so many RPGs. I think there's still some life in the design of how to do an RPG based off of what's happening around the table of Dungeons & Dragons. The reverse happened in Dungeons & Dragons where they tried to make D&D 4th edition more like a video game. That was a piece of horrific terribleness.
Oh man.
As a matter of fact, I just saw, you know, I'm pretty big collector nerd kind of guy, and D&D's played a major role. So I keep eBay messages on my phone or on my account that tells me whenever anything new Dungeons & Dragons comes out. And I literally am trying to own everything you could have possibly owned that was Dungeons & Dragons. And I even spread into TRS a little bit. There's a TSR, Tactical Studies Rule, TSR a little bit, into like board games that weren't related to D&D that I just thought were cool when I was a kid and try to pick that stuff up. But it's funny. I just got an alert last night that said, hey, the 3 core books of 4th edition, some guy's trying to sell them on eBay for $5.
Wow.
Fourth edition was so bad that you can't move that stuff for more than $5, and that's 3 books. So it's quite terrible.
So Kyle, what are you playing right now? Are you a 3.5 guy, or actually playing? Are you playing 5 or?
Well, here's the big difference: is playing and collecting are 2 different things.
Okay, all right. Well, what are you playing? Are you like totally not D&D then? You're like actually really a Rifters guy.
Oh my God, Rifts was so good. Rifts horror is still my favorite horror series that was ever created. No, there are the, I spend a lot of time board gaming, and the board games just is. There's a guy I used to work with who's second in charge at Neversoft, Scott Pease, just an amazing mind, a fantastic designer, a great producer. And I used to go to board gaming conventions, occasionally see him there, occasionally go and on purpose with him. And he made a comment that I'll just never forget. And he said, after all his years of designing Spider-Man and Tony Hawk's and all the other places that he's worked, he said the reason he likes board games, or one of the things he respects about board games, was that all of the balance fit within that 3-foot square of cardboard. It all had to work. It can't break. It can't be over, powerful for one faction and not enough for the other. It couldn't have any kind of imbalance or break within the square of that cardboard, or the board game wouldn't sell. But yet in video games, we can mask all that stuff, or we can put out a point release later that fixes the fact that you can have a knife and a grenade and run at 4 times your speed and stab people in Call of Duty. It's just amazing to think, and it's not necessarily easy. You're still creating a game. Maybe creating Guitar Hero is, in some people's eyes, a very simple thing to do. It isn't. It's very difficult, and it takes a lot of really talented people to get it done. But then on the flip side, some people think, especially about board games, because they'll think about, I hate this term, but there's a term called Ameritrash games, and that describes Monopoly and Sorry and, more Chutes and Ladders and simple games. And people will see those games and go, oh, it's so easy to make a board game. But if you look at Euro games, like something as kind of crossover-ish as Catan, which I imagine most people have played, or Ticket to Ride, which is another crossover, you can go really far into like Civilization 2 or something, Advanced Civilization 2, and get super difficult Euro games that have existed a long time. As a matter of fact, my favorite video game of all time is Civilization, and I don't know which came first, the board game, Civilization, Advanced Civilization, or the video game, because they're both kind of the same thing.
Yeah, the video game definitely came after the board game. So,
but I don't think most people know that board game even exists. And if you love Civilization, go buy Advanced Civilization. That's an unbelievable board game. The thing that's crappy about board games, and kind of as a downer, is that you have to set them up. There's so much work you got to do to get all the pieces and parts out there. But once it's set up, it's absolutely brilliant playing these board games, and everything works within those boundaries, as Scott Pease so astutely pointed out.
Those Ameritrash games, people don't give them enough credit. Don't you know that Candyland basically teaches non-Euclidean geometry? I mean, it's got wormholes. Anyways, I actually think those things are pretty interesting. What was it? Chutes and Ladders. That used to be Snakes and Ladders, which is really sort of an allegory for Dharma, and how one sort of has to give in to the ride between virtue and vice, and you don't really have true control over your life. It's really interesting philosophically what games can teach us and what games indoctrinate us on.
Yeah.
Games are powerful. Board games especially powerful, just because they're so easy to deal with. And the fact that we look at them and think, oh wow, this is such a simple game, but it actually teaches us a lot about how we view life, how we treat other people, what is it that we actually do. Going through the heuristics of a board game can inform us about what is it that we actually do when we're confronted with something.
Yeah. One thing we just can't seem to get a hold of in video games is the emotion of, you know, causing somebody to cry. I mean, it's easier for us to laugh at something. Something funny can happen. I wonder if the threshold for that emotion is lower for laughing than it is for crying. Like if it takes a lot more to make somebody cry than it does to make somebody laugh. Because I've played board game or video games where I laugh. But isn't that what we're chasing? Is kind of like the uncanny valley and the ability to make people emotionally sad. I hate to say.
Those are kind of connected, though.
Yeah, I think. But where I was going is, I wonder if that's a mistake. If I think designers are wondering, and now I'm coming back to music. So I think designers are wondering who aren't incorporating music. How do I get somebody to cry? Let me make the characters seem more realistic. So they do it through story, and then they do it through visuals. So the closer they can get to the uncanny valley, the more realistic it may be. And if it's a good story, you may cry. But music has had the power to do that without any visuals whatsoever for the longest time. So a designer hitches their trailer, if you will, to a composer, and the combination of an uncanny valley plus great audio or great music, and then a good story, hopefully a great story. But that's really kind of the weak link in my mind, because music appeals to such a wide audience. I could write something sad and musically, and I have a feeling get more people to respond to that than if I wrote a paragraph and the same number of people read it. I think some people would think it's not as sad as others, whereas musically, I think I would have more people thinking it's sad than others. So I wonder if the uncanny valley is really kind of unnecessary. I wonder if music is more powerful than writing. And what combination gets people to hit that emotional level? Because that's kind of the secret. That's the next hurdle we're trying to reach with video games, is get people invested emotionally. And then we could go on to the consequences of that. Oh my goodness, that could be very dangerous. What do you think?
Man, that's tough. Let's see. There's a part of me that thinks about that, Woody Allen thing. Comedy is just tragedy plus time. We see something and it's like, oh, it's funny, but the idea that 9 out of 10 times the reason it's funny is because we're just not that connected to it. And when you have these things, these different media that are really good at making us laugh, well, there is a connection there, and that connection is through the medium itself. Oh, that medium provides that separation and perspective, and by virtue of that becomes an effective piece of comedy. But if it was closer, or if it got out of the way, perhaps then maybe it would actually be an effective tragedy, or effective in making us sad. Which is, I'm not sure if I fully believe that, but I think that there is something interesting to that. Our awareness nowadays of what it is that is actually prompting us to feel things is actually something that we have to constantly fight with. We're no longer fighting with, oh, is this story effective enough? We're fighting with the fact that the people that are going to be playing these games are that much more aware of the process of making this thing. They're so aware of the artifice of it all. They can't help but be the jaded gamer that we all get so frustrated with sometimes.
Yeah, that happens in D&D as well. Somebody mentioned earlier, it might have been Bob, that I'm going to scroll up and find it because it was really, really quite brilliant. Yeah, it was Bob. He says D&D is a social. I'm coming back to what we were talking about. It's a social experience with bad jokes, munchkins / min-maxers, the guy who has to play the weirdest race, atmospheric candles, tense rolls, ... the anticipation of having a cool character. But that kind of happens in any kind of video game as well. Some parts of that, I should say. But before I go down that line, the one that really sticks with me is the min-maxer, because that annoys the crap out of me. That's a person who's no longer in the story, like you were talking about earlier, and is just mechanically trying to take advantage of the game. And the first time I realized that in video games and how I think it's a terrible thing was with Blizzard. Sorry, Blizzard. but it was the Warcraft 1, Warcraft 2. I treated Warcraft like it was a civilization game. I wanted to build up because I love Civ. I wanted to build up all the towers and get an army slowly and build up all this stuff, this cool stuff. And I would be like in round 2 and be attacked by somebody next to me and killed. It used to drive me absolutely nuts. It actually drove me away from the game. Worse than that, it drove me away from World of Warcraft. And when I was at Neversoft and Blizzard and the people that owned Activision, did I get that backwards? It was like a French company, right, that owned Blizzard or owned Activision, and then also, I don't remember. Anyway, they gave us
Was it a French company?
They gave us 2 years free World of Warcraft. I didn't log in once. But the thing is, you can't appeal to everybody, and maybe I was treating Warcraft the wrong way because it's not a civilization game. But they gave me the ability to turn it into a civilization game, and then surrounded me by people who could give a crap. And I think that's a big mistake with video games, is that the designers lose sight, or maybe through production or whatever, but they lose sight of the possibilities of their game, and that there are going to be people who are attracted to that possibility. And you've got to have the balance of saying, to use Warcraft for an example, this could be a Civ game to people who love Civ. But if their intention was not for it to be a Civ game, then they should not make it so Civ-like and instead design it in a different direction. And maybe in some ways they just wanted to make it appeal to everybody. If you want to play Civ, you got a chance to play Civ. If you just want to attack people, you've got a chance to attack people. But those things kind of fight against each other, and it caused, for me anyway, and I'm sure I'm not alone, many people to not like the game after a few online sessions. Of course, playing the computer was fun, but playing online against other people who were just taking advantage of that min-maxing and attacking right away made it not fun at all. What do you think about the challenges that are there for designers to appeal to the widest audience, but then hone in the core of the game so that it doesn't cause damage, cause the opposite?
This is I feel like this is kind of connected to the stuff that happened last week. And I'm referring, of course, to EA and Visceral Games. So you guys heard about that.
Yeah.
If you haven't, basically, there's the studio, Visceral, was working on a new game to take advantage of the Star Wars license that EA had. The project was headed up by Amy Hennig, excuse me, who was well known for helming the Uncharted franchise and Naughty Dog. And they were making was going to be this big, epic, single-player experience. And EA, it seems like they thought, okay, it's not about where that thing was going. Visceral was a very successful studio, responsible for very successful games, but that type of game was no longer part of the equation. This idea of games as service, and they're obviously looking at other things that this thing could have been that it was ostensibly not going to be. This game was not going to be Destiny, and maybe that's exactly what EA wanted. EA wanted Destiny, wanted something that was, I guess, a tool for players to partake in and do stuff, and hopefully just keep on living with this structure of interactivity as opposed to anything in particular on the emotional spectrum. I don't know.
Well, there's some designers who are really digging in deep for that. Brenda Braithwaite / Romero. She's got a board. So, hey, look at me. I brought a topic full circle. This is amazing. Get out your recorder. with a few bad segues, but I made it. following me through a segue is like going through a really bad corn maze at Halloween. It's like really low. You can see where you're going, filled with dad jokes. So,
chainsaws.
but there's a board game that Brenda created called Train, I think it's called. Did you guys read about that?
Yeah, I remember Train. I remember I actually saw that at Indiecade a while ago. I mean, it was years ago. I want to say like 2010 or something.
And she's been pursuing that pursuing emotions in games for a long time. And I think it's great. Apparently, I did not play Train. I've only read about it, but just the idea of it, and I'm not going to say, just get on Wiki, look up Brenda Romero or Braithwaite. Her previous name was Braithwaite, but she's married to John Romero for years now. But Brenda created this board game that has quite an emotional impact. And when you read about it, you'll be really surprised what it has achieved. And she seems to have been able to reach emotion in people. But ironically, as a video game designer, she did it as a board game, which she's done many board games, but she's well known as a video game designer. And that's quite remarkable. So why was it achieved in a board game, but not in a video game?
Probably less capital to deal with. I would assume it's easier. You were just saying earlier about a wide range market to hit as opposed to a small market to hit. And funny enough, I find that, I mean, you probably will attest to this too, is that board games are becoming popular again, as if they never were popular at some time. It was just more of, they weren't as popular to pop culture, but people were still playing board games when they weren't much on the scene and weren't being recognized as they were in its limelight. So I would think that one, the biggest thing you had said earlier is that if the board game doesn't work in terms of like rules, if there's any loopholes whatsoever, then like you can't play. You can kind of get around it and things like that, but it's not going to be fun. It's not going to be functional. Whereas with software games, you can get around bugs sometimes or glitches or things like that, and it's forgiven, so to speak. But board games, it usually doesn't have those type of shortcomings. And I think that's probably why she made it. It was quick. It's probably not as much capital. She's hitting a demand audience and a niche audience that is popular right now. And there's probably so many more other reasons.
Yeah. We're definitely in the golden age of board games right now. But this came out quite a few years ago. I would say maybe 8. It's been a long time. But you're right. It doesn't cost as much to make this. So perhaps she didn't have to lean on people to get this vision, which, you know, any decision made by a committee is way more watered down than a decision that's made by 1 or 2 people. And when you can afford to make the board game, which is literally just cut paper and, you know, create some stuff. Although I've seen that she produced quite a really nice looking board game that she presented, I think, at E3. Honestly, you're right. I see the barrier to entry is much lower because you can just do it yourself and you're making most of the decisions, which just goes to show how good of a designer she is. I mean, as well as a writer. But I wanted to bring up, and I wanted to go off on the topic of writers for a minute, but I want to make sure we tuck this one away good and tidy. So if you guys have more, please keep going.
Oh, man. Well, I mean, I don't know. Brenda's done some really interesting stuff, and yeah, she's got some. I mean, her design acumen is impeccable, and the work that she puts into her board games is impeccable. Yeah, I don't know. I remember looking at those games and checking them out and the design that she has for them, all the motivations for those things. I mean, you're talking about how board games do have a pretty low barrier to entry. Yes, you can use random pieces and you can just cut up some paper and all that. But if you check out the stuff that she does, everything is totally perfectly motivated. There are reasons for all of the designs that she's using. You mentioned Train. You know, the paper is presented in a particular way for this specific reason, for this artistic reason, for this mechanical reason. The board is designed as it is for this artistic reason, this mechanical reason. It's really quite amazing. And I'm not sure if I really have anything else to say except she's been making these games. And I'm also glad that she's been beyond making these games, has been really pushing her students, because now she teaches at, I think, UC Santa Cruz. So she teaches at the game design program there, and it's great that there's going to be a generation of game designers that are actually directly inspired by her, I hope.
Yeah. Well, she's now moved on to, I think they're living in Ireland now.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. They are right. She was at UC Santa Cruz.
Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
But you can get game design courses taught by her at lynda.com/linkedinlearning.com.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, yours truly gets to mix them, I'm very proud to say. What was I going to say about
writers?
Gosh, there was another, writers. Yeah. So a friend, so I worked with a guy. He's an acquaintance, but a little bit more than acquaintance. His name's Evan Skolnick, and he's a really talented writer. He's been around a long time. And I've always been fascinated by his career, because I think it's Skolnik, I think is how you spell his last name, Evan. And he has a book out on writing for video games. I've always been fascinated by writers. I've met him, I've worked with him, and I've met other writers. They're very few and far between to find in the industry. And I've wondered many years, and I want to get your guys' opinion on this, if we need more, because I've noticed that a lot of writing falls on the shoulders of designers. And designers may be fantastic designers, but I've met some designers who don't think of it as a story, but more think of it like level design and mechanics and stuff like that. And of course, there's a layer above those, above level designers who are thinking more broadly of the video game. But I've been in meetings where producers are affecting the story, and there's no story person that has a clear vision of how the story should run and how it needs to affect the game design. Rather, more times than not, I've seen game design affecting the story. And I wonder if that's a mistake that we're making in the industry.
Man, I'm not sure. I mean, I'm thinking about Destiny. There's a lot of writers on there, but what are they actually writing?
Yeah, that's like the multiple
there's stories,
composer.
And then there's I don't know. I mean, people are interacting with stories in such different ways now. I got to admit, I've in this game industry, I was one of those young brats. I was a young whippersnapper. I was.
Weren't
I
we
remember
all?
being referred to as that kind of. I have this fun. Well, I don't need to go through the anecdote, the whole thing, but I remember being referred to as this kind of rude guy in talking back to Chris Crawford about how just old and cantankerous his thinking was. He being this really famous game designer known for Balance of Power, as well as being one of the founders of GDC. And I was basically saying, man, you're kind of an asshole for really not having a lot of respect for what people are capable of.
That's awesome that you're standing up.
But yeah, that was me back in the day, and now I feel like this old. I just feel like an old fuddy-duddy about how people are actually experiencing narrative now, and that's actually something I was thinking about while you were talking about stories and emotions. There are a lot of people that get a whole lot of narrative fulfillment and emotional fulfillment from some of the games that are coming out. Undertale. I had actually a fun conversation with some people a few weeks ago, just talking about what is the worth of Undertale, and I'm like, oh, okay, I guess Undertale's kind of cool. It's cute. It's an interesting curiosity. I played it for a bit. I feel like I got it, but I'm not sure if I really needed to play it that much more. But there are obviously people that were really connecting with it, not just not just in terms of the abstract mechanics of it, which I would say fall into the category of cute and funny, but actually the narrative and the emotion that was presented there. And it actually kind of falls flat on me. And I actually feel kind of bad, the fact that I'm not getting as much out of this game as so many other people are, people who I actually really respect.
Interesting. A few things. So, Kyle, you mentioned earlier that when you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, that it's like the dungeon master is more of like the game designer, and he can shape the course of what's going on based off of what the players and something like that. So it's happening in real time. And then, so I'm thinking, okay, so you asked that question, and I was like, well, then if the game designer is the story person, then is that they're kind of doing two of the same jobs, right? So then I was thinking, okay, well, what games have probably kind of done that? And I can't think of any, but I also know like there's this whole bandwagon train that called Last of Us, folks that love it, that have played it. Now I've played it and I haven't finished it. There's a reason why. There's a project that I want to do based off of what came out at the same time. People forget about BioShock Infinite. And that's also very story and narrative driven in its own, form and art form as itself. So people saw Last of Us like, hey, yeah, awesome story. But where did the game design go? How did it feel? Were you as connected? And you don't really hear a lot of people say about that except for me over here. And then I look like the bad guy, right? Because I see BioShock Infinite over here, and I'm like, wow, like not only does everything marry itself, it just feels good. Not to say that I've finished that either. Then I separate the two, and I think about a good game design game, and I think about a good story game that may have just had like copy off of another design or something else. So the story that moved me, which actually got me, which was my first Castlevania game I played, was Lords of Shadow on PS3. The story, the narrative, that was Patrick Stewart was the narrator of that, and how he told the story. By the end of it, I was so moved. I remember just going to bed like, what just happened? Like, did I just do this whole game right now? Like, I don't remember playing necessarily. I just remember like what's going to happen to this character and how did he turn into who he is. And then I think about another game that I had played recently, and I'm thinking, okay, this is really good in game design, but it falls short on the story, and the game is blanking from my mind in this course of the example. But you can see how there are some that do it well, some that don't, some that are separate, and then others that do it all together, but there's not that many. So I think it really comes down to answer your question of having the right team or having the right consensus of understanding what it's trying to achieve overall. Are you trying to win people over with hearts, or are you trying to have the game be fun as it is implied, or are you trying to do both? And if that's the case, how do you marry everything and conflate all of your ideas into one art form in terms of it reaching the masses to speak to everybody that you're trying to reach?
Man. You know, at the end there, you mentioned art form. And I saw an article. I want to go to Bop's question Adriana's question in the chat room, and then I wanted to also touch on Cuphead before we go. You mentioned art form, and the art to create art, it has to be very directional. As far as I'm concerned, it has to be of a very common goal. If there's one person, it's very simple to reach that goal, or very simple to stay focused on that goal. If it's a bunch of people, they need to come together for this common goal to create art. If not, if you gave everybody a paintbrush and randomly told them to do stuff but didn't tell them what the goal was, then the art wouldn't look that great, perhaps. But and this is where I think the indie community is the most powerful for the future of the game industry. And this is, I believe this at the bottom of my soul, is if you're going to do something new, if you're going to try something unique, if you're going to really push story, you're going to try to emotionally engage the viewer, I think that's going to happen on the indie level more than it's going to happen on the AAA level. Although the finances on the AAA level could make it happen. They could, but the bloat of the size of a team makes that very difficult to get everybody focused achieving this thing. Gosh, I saw an article this weekend asking if it's the end of the indie, run. I was reading an article, and the person who wrote it seemed to feel that the indies are on their way out. And oh my God, I feel that would be such a terrible thing to have happen to the game industry, is to lose the indies. What do you guys think of that?
I can see that. Only because I've seen a few patterns happening. I've seen the biggest thing with most independent developers is their struggle to find funding or get funding through crowdsourcing. And they may have a great project, but it didn't reach their capital. So they're trying to quit their day jobs so they can work on it full time and port it to the platforms that people like to play on and not just cater to the PC master race. And then I also see a regurgitation of the same ideas over and over, right? Like 2D platformers and pixel art games and 8-bit stuff. And I think there was a time that, I mean, and it's funny because I'm actively looking at projects and stuff. I'm thinking what stands out. And there's not too many, and if they are, they're at a mid-level in development cycle, whereas they've at least shipped at least one successful game, and then maybe the big publishers like Sony and Xbox come in and pick them up, and so on and so forth. But unless like more publishers that I would say like are Devolver Digital step in and really look for those niche games that are standing out, and like Ruiner and a couple other new projects that have come out recently this year and the years before, I don't really know what's going to happen, because if you look at your Steam stores, there is like a repeat of titles that look like other games. And like there's a Dreamcast game I just saw, something Izzy, and
Yeah.
I was like, how does this look different? And
Yeah, I don't like that in
cool,
movies either, when somebody releases a movie and it's just, I was talking about that at lunch today. We're talking about Dunkirk. I haven't seen Dunkirk yet, but I saw yesterday that Dunkirk, the movie, actually was a movie from the 60s or 50s. I felt like an idiot, because I'm like, I was all excited. Oh my God, it's an original movie. And I'm like, no, it's not. There's already been a Dunkirk. And perhaps this Dunkirk's interesting, but just the fact that there already has been a Dunkirk, and Hollywood is already just churning out repeats of stuff from television shows, it disappoints me. And what was mentioned in the chat room was indies are not, Bob said indies aren't on the way out, I think, but they're going towards an oversaturation problem.
Yeah.
I agree completely, because there's what we know about indies, and this is something that needs to be taken seriously. And there's some companies that are, and I don't mean to patronize, but that game company seems to be doing it right. Is you need to come out with unique visions.
Mm-hmm.
You need to pay people so that they can give you the best work that they can possibly give.
Say that,
and they understand that you don't have a lot of money, but you need to do something rather than like, hey, let me give you a free meal at McDonald's. And you need to stop creating the crap that we've already seen 1,000 times in the past. It drives me absolutely nuts. I don't need another side scroller. Because that says to me, as far as here I am on my soapbox, my soapbox moment of the show, I cannot stand somebody saying to me, I'm a game company, I'm an indie company. That means something. And then they go, and here's my side scroller that looks like Batman from the Nintendo. Are you kidding me? You have the potential to create something completely new, something that's a complete vision. And as a matter of fact, the more vision you have, the more chance you're going to get people who want to work on your project for less money than if you just say, hey, I'm going to create the next side scroller Batman. It's going to be amazing. We'll call it Catman because it can't be licensed. And I need you to create the best music possible. I'm out. I'm not interested in you creating something that already exists. I'm interested in you following your vision and doing something amazing that's going to change the world. And I understand that it's a 1 in a million shot. But like I learned in soccer so many years ago, you cannot score unless you shoot at the goal. And so as long as you keep trying to create something new, you're going to get people who support you. But the minute you just go, it just feels like you're practicing. Like, I want to see how to create a game. My favorite game is Batman on the Nintendo. I'm going to try to create another Batman on the Nintendo. And then those people cry about they can't get teammates, they can't get people to support it. Drives me crazy.
Hold on just a moment. So, I mean, it might feel weird since I do work at that game company. I like to think we're doing something cool and different and whatnot.
Oh, you are. That's what I brought that up at the beginning. There are companies doing it absolutely right, and that game company is one of them.
Yeah, there is something though to, what is there to be said, and there is worth in saying something really quite small and quite eloquent, and like for example, Chopin did the nocturne. Some people would say that Chopin's piano nocturnes are the ultimate of that type of music. Scriabin in the 19th century from making nocturnes. And then people would say that, wow, Scriabin's nocturnes are some of the ultimate. Those are the ultimate form of that nocturne form. And then you actually have some American composers during the 19th and 20th century, like Amy Beach, and they did their own take on the nocturne, and they put it out there. And there are people that say, wow, this is actually wonderful. This is wonderful American music. These are wonderful nocturnes. There's something to making something that is the ultimate of something that has come before. I would never disparage someone for just making another side scroller because, well, and maybe this is just because of the fact that I'm actually a fan of those games. Like some of my very, very favorite games are scrolling platformers and scrolling shooters and belt scrolling beat 'em up games and stuff like that. But I
how
think
many of those can you play? I mean, honestly, like we see side scrolls all the time, and I have no desire to move on to another side scroll. Like that is absolutely a number one. If I'm reading a game, I've got some time, I want to play a game, and I see side scroll in the title, I skip it, no matter how fantastic it may be.
Well, someone in the chat actually mentioned Cuphead. Hey, has anyone played Cuphead yet?
No,
I
not
played
yet.
it at E3 last year.
It's a platforming side-scrolling game,
but it's in a different style. It's not the same. It doesn't have that 8-bit style, and that's really
the visuals on this game absolutely lend an interest to the game, hitting on that kind of like Steamboat Willie kind of 1930s cartoon.
1930s.
I really appreciate that the music is done in that style. Oh my gosh!
That's why I wanted to come back to this. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty awesome. Just getting a really good, this really great big band group in Canada to play the music on the soundtrack.
Yeah,
there are some great tunes. Like honestly, I feel bad because it's on vinyl. This is one of those things where some of those tunes you want to repeat it, and honestly, I have an issue with vinyl because that thing is not made for being played 100, 200, 300 times.
Yeah.
It just isn't.
Yeah.
So you're going to degrade it. But oh man, those things are kind of awesome. There are some great tracks and there's some really good performances on there. I actually did say something on the live chat to the effect of sometimes I think those guys are actually a little bit too free with the tempo. They actually rush a bit in some places. It's like, it actually kind of gets me out because the game itself is such a rhythmic game. Honestly, I haven't played that much of it because I don't have an Xbox One, unfortunately. I don't have a PC that's powerful enough for it. But I mean, I played the demo. It's like, oh man, it's a very strong and rhythmic sort of platforming game. And the music also has a similar rhythmic drive. And I liked how that was complementary to that. Hey, Cuphead's great, right?
Yeah, absolutely. For its style and its aesthetic that it's going for, that's something different. And that's what I believe, like, what I'm preaching about is if you are going to do it, like, do it a little bit differently. Streets of Rage has been done. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles has been done. Rayman has been done. I'm sorry. Like, Mario's like the only one I don't think has been copied a lot, ironically enough.
Yeah.
But
licensing.
Yeah, we want to talk about that one. But 1930s, I don't remember seeing that in my homework that I've done. So,
and that goes to the point I was making: is do something new. I'm going to turn away if it's a side scroller, but I'm not turning away from Cuphead because something captured my attention. It doesn't capture my attention if an indie developer is just going to create another side scroller. And by saying that, I mean, just there's nothing unique about it. There's nothing interesting. And you have an opportunity, as I was saying, you have an opportunity to do something amazing. I think people limit themselves. They say, oh, they're thinking, I think sometimes indie developers are thinking too big. Like, I can't do, like, let's say that all of a sudden magically in the world of video games, they said, we have to follow the rules of Kyle Johnson's opinion. So that we can't be a side scroller and we have to do something. They're going to go, well, what the hell does that guy want?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you can't do a side scroll. Look, Cuphead's looks amazing, and absolutely, I'm looking forward to it. And it is a side scroller, but I don't want another boring side scroller, another typical side scroller, another side scroller that looks like the developer is practicing on how to make video games. And again, it comes back to the point that eventually they're going to want sound effects, they're going to want music.
Exactly.
And we do honestly get it's funny. I want to make sure I choose my words wisely here. Every game needs audio, and the more that the designer puts into, or / developer puts into making something that appeals, the better chance they're going to have finding good sound design, good composition for the kind of dollar that they can afford, or trade that they can afford, or whatever the cost is. It's difficult for people to say yes if they sense that you haven't put your all into the game you're trying to design.
Yeah. And I also want to add to that is, like, I think the reason I'm preaching about it at least being a little bit more different. I mean, if the developers is going to create that style genre of games, is that it's our creativity and work that goes into it, at the same time. And it pushes us to be a little bit, more different in our own styles and create our own niches and own sound character. If we have these more interesting games that independent developers have the opportunity to bring to the table, if AAA developers are not going to, and that breeds more work for us and more sound character and opportunities and life into the community. And so, I mean, that's really what I think that's the undertone of it all, is like the real secret behind it, right? Like, it pushes us to, make something different. We have all of these sample libraries and audio tools, free, cheap, expensive, whatever your range is, and we want to use them. And it would be cool if we could use them with things that are all different for everyone. And it's just like, yeah, you did that one, and I remember this sound from that, and you did this, and I did that. We can relate to each other in our time for it, rather than waiting 20, 40 years from now being like, oh, you did that a long time ago, it was really cool, I can make that sound then. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with, practicing and doing things, but there's a level, I think, at which you need to decide, hey, I've done so many practices, it's time to get serious, or, hop to something else, hobby or professional, whatever you want to do. And I think that's really what it comes down to.
You know what else it comes down to? Time. And we still haven't thanked our sponsor.
Hey, thank you, Isotope, for sponsoring the show while Kyle complains about stuff on his soapbox. And I'm not a grumpy old man, I promise. That's my cue for Isotope. Please, Isotope, put in your next product, Kyle is not a grumpy old man. Speaking of which, next week, I have to set this timeline. I've been doing something very special with some Isotope software, and I'm really anxious to show people. I think it's a really cool thing. You don't have to like it, but I think it's cool. And I was trying to line it up for this week, but it didn't quite, the timing wasn't quite. Like, if the show was tomorrow, I'd be ready. So next week I'm going to try to do, Chase, can you write that on the list of magic that magic topics of awesomeness that you have? One of the things I want to cover next week is something you can do with Isotope software that's related to game audio in a big way.
Cool. I'm excited.
Well, you shouldn't be. I mean, it's me. Come on. I'll be lucky to get through it without a horrible segue.
Man, this new Kyle today, not new, but it's an interesting permutation of Kyle. Is this because of that Atari hat?
It's fully the Atari hat. I am energized.
The game hat on, so you're really putting the game in game audio hour here. So much game talk.
I love games. Hey, you know what? I want to leave with this question, though. I mean, games is the whole reason I'm doing what I'm doing. Do you guys find that as as people that work on games, do you play? Oh, Chase, you're disqualified. As soon as I heard the question, I realized I'm asking the wrong crowd. Do you guys find that the more you work on video games, the less you play video games?
Well, I mean, part of I personally feel like my job as a game developer, especially as a music composer, audio designer, and especially since I am often the only one of that within a team, I have to play the game and I have to be amazing at it so that I know exactly what I'm doing as an audio guy.
Oh, not your game. I mean, as a person that develops games, do you find you spend less time playing other people's games?
No, I mean that's the thing. I would say
you
that
have
my
to play your
game
own games in and out.
But that's the thing. You don't have to. It's amazing how many people don't.
No. If you're making a game, you play the crap out of that game. That's the thing. Is I get tied into the game I'm making.
But that's also the thing. There's so many people that don't, especially if they're a freelance audio guy who is working within a structure where it's just, oh, I'm filling in blanks on a spreadsheet.
Oh no, that's that. Oh well, that's my opinion.
But that still
I think it's a bad
happens,
thing.
you know, it really does. And
It really does, yeah.
Oh my God, can you imagine a film composer never watched the film, just start laying down music?
That's the
But that
analogy I
also
use all the
happens.
time.
That totally happens.
How is that possible? He's writing to the picture. He has to watch the film.
No, it totally happens that way. Oh, even with games, actually. There's actually plenty of video game soundtracks, especially in Japan, where they will write the music first, and then the game is barely made, but they have this trove of tracks that they can use, and they'll plug it into the game as needed. Totally happens.
I mean, I can kind of see where that has a slight value. I don't agree with it, but like if the game, I remember we used to, we're going way over, sorry, but we had a conversation with Alex about writing music first and then designing a game to that. That makes sense, but Alex stayed in the mix. You know, he kept writing more and more music he was part of the development life cycle. So I can see music first informing the game, but I can't imagine just pulling out and saying, here's 20 tracks, because you said you're going to need 20 tracks. Don't call me anymore. Make the game work around these 20 tracks. I could never imagine somebody doing that and getting away with it.
So you're saying that, I mean, I don't know, it's just weird to me. Like, if you say you claim to love games, right, and you want to work in the industry so bad, but you don't play the game, you don't play games, either like other people's games or the games that you even worked on that you wanted to work in the industry for, like at all. I understand about time, but it's like you don't, but everything about time, right? I have this philosophy is like, if you want to, you'd make time. And so you look for, you just find time to do something that you supposedly enjoy and are so passionate about. There's a disconnect there for some reason right there. I'm not understanding something in there.
And should it be? Are we going to evolve into our next form, the game audio 90 minutes or something?
Yeah, we better get out of here. We're killing the crowd.
I mean, Sean in the chat actually says that's basically how God of War music worked for the most part. Gerard and other composers would write a bunch of music, then Sony would decide what to record with an orchestra and spice it up and place it across the game.
Yeah. Topic for next week.
And that
lots of topics for next week. Whew.
I'll call Gerard. Hey, buddy.
Yeah, let's do that.
We're about to throw you under the bus. Want to get on the show? I would never do that to Gerard. He's a dear friend. But I mean, that says a lot about the talent of the audio director to take a bunch of music and say, this is what fits, this doesn't fit, here's where it fits. And if you got if you got deep pockets, you can just, pay a bunch of people to write a bunch of music you're not going to use.
Yep.
Anyway, all right, let's say goodbye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Wait a minute. Facebook, Twitter, all that stuff.
Oh, yeah. So like us, be social, always be social. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, retweet the stupid crap that we say because we get real popular that way. And Insta us on Instagram, which we don't have an Instagram account, so awesome. Good job. You've seen the future. And I guess that's it. Thanks.